Thomas Leeds. Welcome to Weird Sauce, and thank you for welcoming us into your location, I believe, in the United Kingdom. Could you kindly introduce yourself for our audience?
Yep, I'm Thomas Leeds, and I am living in Southend in the UK. And I'm a stay-at-home dad at the moment to my two little kids, and a writer of children's books. And yeah, it's lovely to speak to you.
So, this introduction is seemingly benign compared to the story of your life. And therefore, I would immediately want to know the context under which you became a writer.
Okay,
And I think we need a little bit of background story on that. So please tell us the story of how you became who you are now today.
cool. Okay. Um, so I got into writing something I never thought I'd be able to do. After I so To give you some background, so basically I was in a car accident when I was 19, and I was crossing a road in London, and I was hit by a car, and apparently flew through the air and landed on my head, and fractured my skull and my back in three places, and there was a large blood clot in my head that then had to be removed. So I had a very serious head injury and back injury as well, but the head injury was particularly bad. And when I after my surgery, I had forgotten everything from before the accident, um, and there were some other issues as well. So later on, I developed epilepsy as a result because of the scar tissue on my brain. Um, but it wasn't so as far as the memory went. So I'd forgotten everything before the accident, which was obviously I didn't know any different at the time. Um, but yeah, it took me a long time. They said, "Oh well, if you go to this place, or you know, do, try and explore that time period that you've forgotten, and go to places that you went to, or listen to music or whatever. Um, that some of it might come back." So I did that for many years, for 10 years, and then suddenly, having kind of tried to accept that it was never going to come back because it had been 10 years, and it was on the eve of my 30th birthday. I was compiling a playlist for my 30th birthday party, and because I was born in the 80s, I it was an 80s theme party, and so I was putting together this playlist of music. And I thought I had heard them all. I thought I'd heard all the music because over that 10-year period, I'd been trying to kind of, tap into that. But I pressed skip one more time, and then this song came on that I apparently had not heard in all that time. And it was "The Whole of the Moon" by the Waterboys. And as soon as it came on, it was amazing. There were suddenly all these memories just kept popping into my head, and yeah, I think it wasn't that many. There was about six that time that were very vivid flashbacks, I guess you would say. And they didn't make sense to me at the time because even though I kind of knew they were memories, they were kind of abstract. They turned out to be very early memories, so things didn't really make sense. So then so I was very excited. I immediately told Sophie, my wife, and so we wrote it down because my short-term memory is not great as well as a result. And then the next day, I called my mum and met up with my brothers and told them, and having them confirm all this. And my mum was like, "Oh yeah, that was that," and kind of explaining that these were very real memories and very early memories. So that was amazing. And then yeah, it kind of went from there, and then that really changed everything for me because even though it was only a few memories, just having something real from the beginning was amazing. And then since then, there've been a few more instances, but not many memories at all. But just it's made a real difference having something from the past.
So, my immediate thought in this is whoa, because I remember reading the story of that's how I came across your story on the BBC and how you recall this. But that was not a auditory recount of it. You just recounted it of it as though you were telling me just an anecdotal story of something in which you lose 19 years of your memory and then you just move on quite, and then another 10 years of rehab. And so I want to make a big massive pause right here, and I want to understand emotionally, and I want to go inside your head if I'm invited there. How does a 19-year-old wake up in a hospital surrounded by people that he cannot or she cannot anchor it into a context? And what was that like, to begin with? Then we can go into the next 10 years.
Yeah, no, it is so. Yeah, I talk about it as if it's normal, as if it's nothing, because obviously it's been a long time, and I've kind of, I've talked about it a lot and processed it over many years. But yeah, initially, what was interesting, and the neurologist explained later on that it can happen. It's quite common that there's a chemical imbalance when you have such a major head injury, that can affect all kinds of things and can affect your mood, or how you feel about things one way or the other. And some people can get more agitated or angry or whatever. And for me, it seemed to put me in this really weirdly, temporarily, but for quite a while, for about a year, in this really weird sort of disproportionately sort of serene state where I really don't remember feeling worried or panicked at all. Whereas now you might think that's really strange to not be thinking, what's happened. So it was weird. So it was kind of a combination of this apparently chemical imbalance where I just felt very calm and not panicked, and kind of wonderstruck by everything I was seeing. But at the same time, also when you have total memory loss like that, and you don't have any episodic memory to call on, you kind of don't know any different. You don't know how much is gone until people start telling you everything. And because, so it's kind of hard to explain, but yeah, it's kind of like being a baby again, because you're kind of looking at this hospital curtain and these people that you don't recognize, and trying this food that you've never known before. And you're not thinking, oh, why don't I know what that is? Because you don't have any memory to draw on. And so it's kind of hard to explain to people. I think it would have been harder, perhaps, like talking to other survivors and stuff. Had I had something to call on, had I remembered something, then perhaps I'd be freaking out because this patch of my life had seemingly gone. But when you've got nothing, and you just kind of, and as I say, I was very fortunate, I think, to have been left in this state of kind of happiness, weirdly, or not happiness, but um, yeah, I was kind of, and also I was on a lot of medication for the pain because I'd broken my back in 3 places, and all of that. And as far as being filled in and people making you aware of what's happened, I mean, my family was just so glad that I was alive, and they were aware that I needed a lot of rest. My dad's a doctor, my mum's medically trained, so they just wanted me to kind of rest, and they realized that I just needed help to kind of adjust. And so yeah, my early memories of when I went home, just resting a lot at home, and then just being allowed to just live a very simple life initially, just kind of, learning, just kind of sitting in the garden, and yeah, so I was very, very fortunate to have the support that I had. That made a massive difference. Meeting other people since then who've had not necessarily very similar, but who've had head injuries and memory loss and things. Yeah, I was extremely fortunate to not only have parents with medical background, but so who kind of could help me in that regard, but also just such a supportive family. That's the most important thing. Who kind of sheltered me a bit, and then kind of didn't sit me down and go, you need to know this, this, and this, because that might have freaked me out more. Where it was kind of just like a general, like a gentle, slow adjustment. But it did come later. It actually became harder later on, because as you start to realize what you're missing, and also your peers start to sort of get on with their lives, and you realize what you're supposed to be doing as a guy at that age, and all these things that you were about to do, or you should be doing, or whatever. And And so yeah, it became harder, and that chemical imbalance I spoke about sort of eased off, it seemed. And yeah, so then it became tougher, and then also as my back injury recovered. I was lucky that I was so young. The doctors are always saying, when you're 19, if something like that happens, the bone heals quite well. So I was lucky that it was relatively okay after months, I suppose. But then I also started. Then later I started to develop the seizures, which also made my short-term memory worse. And so yeah, it was kind of a two-wave thing where it was kind of like I just started to try to kind of find a way that I could make my life work, and then I started having the seizures, which a neurologist had warned me would come eventually because it's quite common to develop post-traumatic epilepsy after a massive head injury. So so yeah, that made life hard again, to adjust and try and find my way and stuff. But as I say, the main thing was having that support, having a supportive family that could help, and obviously that helps your outlook as well, which is a massive part of it. So yeah.
And in your environment, you just mentioned that your parents were medically trained, so that makes a very massive differences because they probably were able to have a network and to have resources to
Yeah.
them to help you out. So I'm wondering whether, in addition to give you space and time to recover, which is essential, rather than probably push through different therapeutics or different ways of getting quote unquote better, was there a sense that to connect things neurologically to back to emotion in relation to memory, was there an intention there to do things like one step at a time? Because you then mentioned this idea of music later on, but I'm wondering whether things around familiarity with taste, familiarity with colors, familiarity with certain shape that you liked more. Did you try sequential therapeutics in these approach with sensory readaptation and reacclimatization of the brain in order to bring memory back? Or did you actually take it kind of on an emotional basis, which is, I will go with what feels more hopeful or right? How was that like for you?
Well, it was interesting because a lot of the neurologists that I've spoken to since obviously have all these sort of very advanced new ideas of what can be done. Um, and like the best possible things that you could be offered. And obviously, this happening to me in the UK, where we have the NHS, and which is amazing and a huge privilege to be able to get the treatment when you need it, regardless of whatever. But once you are moving on with your life and you become what we call an outpatient here, where you're no longer in hospital and you're having appointments and things, um, you can't sort of say, oh, could I, what could I need? It's kind of what you do need. And so if you're in a relatively good position, you're living at home, you've got a doctor with you, and um, you're kind of, and my mum and dad are very, very positive, optimistic people who kind of didn't tell me, oh, things are going to be really tough if you don't, so there was, so at the time, and as I didn't know any different, I kind of just tried to get on, to kind of be in normal life, and there was no specific kind of therapies in terms of trying to get those long-term memories back that I recall. But it was, I had support from a great charity called Headway here in the UK, who are brilliant at giving you tips and ways to help you with memory, and just supporting you in general as a survivor of a head injury. But yeah, it was kind of, the advice was to do a bit of both of what you've just talked about, so, but in a more casual, so not sitting down with a neurologist with flashcards or whatever. And obviously I've done lots of tests to kind of see the specific problems that I've had, because I've also ended up with things like, which we didn't realize for quite a while, that there was this specific thing with with so-called face blindness, where I wasn't recognizing. So even once I had got to know somebody, so I knew that, okay, so that's my mom or that's my dad or whatever, and then I was making new memories of those people, and I could, if you said, who's your mom, and I could tell you, but then if I saw her out of context, I wouldn't recognize her. So it took a while to realize that that was a specific kind of problem, because I wasn't forgetting everyone every time. It was that I didn't recognize their face. So then if I got other cues, or like they said who they were or whatever, then I could sort of piece that together again. But yeah, so it was quite complicated. But yeah, in terms of trying to get those memories back, it was just kind of going through kind of in a private setting, at home, trying to sort of try a bit of everything, and looking at my old, because I was only 19 at the time, so in the house, and I had much younger brothers, so we still had all the old toys, and we had all the all my old drawings and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, just kind of a mix of everything, really, to try and bring back those, try and jog your memory from before.
And in terms of so you saying that short memory was also not great. So I'm just wondering what type of scale are we talking about? So how long would a close memory, a short term memory last for? Is it something you did not within the last 24 hours, or was it a little bit longer than that? What was the scale? What kind of scale are we talking about?
Yeah, so with my short-term memory, which is still not great, and it depends, it varies from day to day. And this morning, thankfully, I'm not doing too badly so far. Um, but it's something, again, that I've just got used to. It can be very frustrating depending on what you're trying to do in life. But so basically, on an average day, I will just forget things that I've just done, apparently, or whatever. Um, so everything from when I'm quite often disappointed that someone's eaten my breakfast, or like I can sometimes take a long time in the bathroom because I keep forgetting what I'm doing, um, and conversations that I've had and things that we've done. And it's always worse around a seizure. So like if I have had a seizure, then there's this kind of haze around that time. Um, yeah, it seems to be a bit indiscriminatory. Like, well, I say that, but my neuropsychologist recently said that there does seem to be a link with. So if something has a big emotional response, then I'm more likely to remember that. So because when you talk to me, I seem like I remember a lot of stuff because, well, I do. We all, yeah, I'm still very fortunate that my brain does what it does. But the things I'll sort of recount tend to be things that were very, very funny or very sad or very, there was some kind of emotional. If I try and recall more mundane things, it doesn't. That doesn't really help. So that seems to be, which I suppose makes sense for ordinary people, or not ordinary, but people without a brain injury, because that I guess that's we kind of evolved to remember very scary things, or very so you kind of um, so so that seems to be a thing. But yeah, it can be very sketchy. And for instance, my just trying to call on some anecdotes, like my little girl would be, so I'm at home with them all the time, and I would be like surprised that she had dressed herself because she was only 2, and I'd be like, "Oh, amazing!" And then like, "How has she done this?" And she'd be like, "Silly, Daddy, you just dressed me." So it was all kinds of things. I'm kind of recounting like nice things in the home or whatever, but obviously, if you're trying to go about your life and out in the world, it can be quite frustrating and scary, because sometimes I'll just find myself thinking, where was I? What was I doing? And socially trying to get on with it in a social setting, that can be quite tricky as well, because trying to hang on to conversations and keep track of who's who, combined with the face blindness thing, can be a bit of a nightmare. So yeah, it's complicated, and every day I there are things that I forget in the day. And I'm just going back to what I said originally for my original sort of stage of recovery. Very fortunate now to have Sophie, my wife, who is just amazing. And she is like, I'm so lucky to have created or found myself in this life where um, I don't feel as disabled as I probably would in other settings because everybody around me knows this, including my little kids who are used to, they don't know any different. They're used to having a forgetful dad. And, they're kind of like my backup, if you like, of my memory. So they're used to just going, oh, you did this, you did that, and we did this. And don't worry about that because, so, yeah, I'm very lucky to have this support. I think that is the most important thing.
And so you said something which then jolt my own memory, and um, in a very bizarre catch-22 scenario. I just thought I want to ask him this question, but there's a very high chance that he won't remember. Which is, do you remember what it felt like to look at the world as an adult, as a young adult, as though you were just a baby? Because that's the one experience I think no one else, apart from people like yourselves who've had the misfortune to go through such trauma, can share with us. Do you have this?
Yeah, I do. So as I say, fortunately, I do have memories of back then. It just kind of tends to be the more sort of emotionally, um, yeah. No, I definitely do remember feeling just like yeah, like I've kind of found this good word for it, like kind of wonderstruck, where like everything is kind of new and exciting and in a way that I guess you wouldn't have at that age. Yet, literally everything from food to trees and, everything. And then going, through this process of everything that was in our house to then everything that was in our neighborhood. And then literally like a child would, I guess, like just there wasn't a world really until I started to build it, realize what was there and stuff. And yeah, just in terms of my outlook, I mean, my mum and dad were talking about this recently about how it was kind of. My mum said, I was more like a child because, just my kind of outlook on things was very kind of, I don't know the word, I suppose elementary. Like kind of um, I would, for instance, things like Christmas, they kind of, my first Christmas was kind of like, they had this giant man child because I was, and I had much younger siblings at the time who were, still in that phase as well. So it was like they had a new child again, who was just kind of like so wrapped up in the whole thing because it was so new and just feeling just like this sense of wonder about everything and not necessarily having that kind of hard reality yet that grown-ups have kind of got. And some of the things I've had to get used to as a parent now and all that kind of stuff, that wasn't there at all. So like I was I just remember feeling just amazed by a lot of stuff, scared by some stuff as well, as it went on, like especially when my memory was playing tricks on me or whatever. But yeah, just generally it's hard for me to kind of say instead of this or like compared to how you might feel because I don't know any different. Um, yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
No, it does. It does. So the next chapter of your life, which is again just literally stunning to me, is the fact that so not only do you do this and then you just carry on having a methodology, so to speak, even with the environment that you have to adapt to what is in front of you, and then just to carry on. But then you did mention being married and having children. So I'm just really curious about, not in a bad way, but in a sort of scientific way of how could this happen? Because there's so many functional reality in which this seems impossible. So I think
Sure.
as a complete human being, I'm sitting there and going,
Yeah.
how could this even happen?
um, yeah, I mean, I can see that. I think I think lots of things. I think my family kind of instilled. So even when I was getting more frustrated, and there was a point of depression as well, a few years after, particularly around the time that I started to have the seizures, which made life really difficult initially and scary. And, I had just started to get into swimming. I relearned how to swim with this amazing lady who taught me a lot of things. She was like a sports rehab person. And then I had a physio as well and stuff like that. So I'd learned all these new things, and was starting to feel independent and capable of doing things. And then started having the seizures, so that was difficult. But I think because my family's out, they've always been so glass half full type. Like they've always said, "Oh well, you can do this and you can do that," and so I've always kind of seen things from a very kind of like, what can I do rather than what I can't. Even though, don't get me wrong, there have been times, and I've had some dark times when it did get too much and it was hard to cope. Um, but in terms of, as you say, like getting married and having children and stuff, I mean, so I approached dating uh, kind of not too differently to how because I had that attitude where I was thinking, I would like to have a family one day, and I would like a partner. And, I had got used to my friends and my family having partners and whatever. And funnily enough, what was the timing kind of was good that here in the UK at least, this thing of internet dating had just kind of become a thing around the time that I was kind of feeling ready to try and find a partner and see how that works and stuff. And as somebody with short-term memory problems and facial recognition problems and all that kind of stuff, that was really useful, because then I wasn't having to try and meet someone and keep track of someone in real life. Well, in real life I was, but I was able to have these profiles and keep a track of who was who, and in that way, and you start off your relationship with that person sending messages to each other that then are logged in a thing. So I was very fortunate, the timing of that becoming a thing at the time where I was of the age to kind of be doing that and exploring that. And very, very fortunate to meet Sophie, who's just been amazing. And she just has a good outlook on life, which again, I think is from her family, who've been through a lot as well. And she's just kind of, just kind of sees me for what I can do and not what I can't. And for all the reasons that normal, I shouldn't say normal, but for people who don't have this particular problem, fall in love and meet their partners and whatever, you have all those normal reasons. And then, it was just kind of about, making it work. And so, when we first met, I think, I wouldn't have recognized her again or whatever. But I think it was about, because a part of my whole thing was that I was very honest and, I guess you could say, naive about people for a long time, because I didn't know to kind of not trust people or whatever. And because of my memory and stuff, I have to rely on other people a lot. So I can't be that I have to trust people. So because of that, I'm very upfront and honest in a way that other people find a bit sort of most of the time refreshing, I guess, because I don't sort of hold back, and I don't see why I should have to, So I would I was very upfront about my problems and how different my life was and whatever. So there was never any kind of realization. I mean, obviously, I guess practically it's different once you actually start to live with me or whatever. But Sophie always knew from the get go, before we even met, that I had a brain injury, and that I had memory problems, and that I had facial recognition issues and all that kind of stuff. And she thankfully was accepting of that and said, "Okay, well, so so I was very fortunate that I met this lovely lady who who kind of accepted me for who I was, and not what I had lost and what I was dealing with. And then going forward, as you asked about parenthood, I mean, thankfully, I was, she has this wonderful family as well. So then I was accepted into their family and embraced there, and her wonderful mum, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago. She was just incredible. She kind of treated. I think possibly because of, as we're often saying, she she kind of loved that I was a bit of a child at that time as well. So when they would have Christmas and stuff, she would put on a special thing for. This is my mother-in-law. Like, she would put on a special thing for my birthday and Christmas and stuff. So I kind of was really embraced by them, and they were all of Sophie's siblings were having children and stuff, and so we were just kind of in this loving environment that never made me feel like I couldn't do those things, or I couldn't, just because I struggled with a lot of things and couldn't have a lot of the jobs that perhaps like a lot of the others had. And because Sophie, we're quite progressive people, we don't really see this sort of perhaps traditional norms that society would kind of put on you not so long ago, or in a lot of cultures they still would, I guess. So Sophie has a really great career in publishing, and she's very good at what she does. And so as far as starting a family and how that's going to work went, she was, and also I've always been around children and had a big family and stuff. So I was always prepared for kind of having children in a way that perhaps a lot of guys might not be. So we kind of had this understanding that, Sophie had a career and that I would be at home helping, looking after our kids and stuff. So obviously that came with challenges, because when you have short-term memory problems and the occasional seizure sometimes, but I'm very lucky because my seizures never seem to happen unless I'm having a really bad brain day, as I call them. So I get a lot of warning. So there was never any sense of like, how's that going to work if I'm out with the kids? So, it was, there were times when I would get scared or anxious about it, but yeah. So that's kind of, yeah. I'm in a very, I never lose sight of how grateful, how lucky I have been to have all this happen to me in a society and family as kind of open-minded and accepting of these differences, if you like, and the idea of me going into marriage and parenthood in a very different way, perhaps to some guys in other societies, maybe, or other, because the idea of me being at home with the kids, it's still, don't get me wrong, there are still old-fashioned people here and people who think, oh, that's weird, don't you feel? But yeah, I've just kind of we've kind of made it work, and now that I am thankfully have found a career for myself outside of that, which is very exciting, something that I never thought I'd be able to do. So I'm talking about the writing, sorry. That is very exciting, and so having that to do as well has really helped me confidence-wise, and seeing myself as a partner and a dad and stuff. Obviously, if you've got something else about you that you're doing, contributing, then obviously that's lovely too. Other than just parenting, which is a very, very important job and very hard, as I'm sure a lot of your listeners will know.
Indeed. Do you think, from the perspective of your experience, that maybe for lots of us, memories are actually a burden? Of course, they give us context in which we can operate, but when we talk about emotional memories, that can create a lot of problems for people. Not having access to memory in a counterfactual way could be a lack of being burdened by the past and our pasts.
I think there's certainly some truth. I think it's complicated, as with all these things. I think it's neither a yes or no type thing, because there is certainly, I mean, it sounds like silly examples, but I mean, my brothers and sister will quite often say, "Oh, you're so lucky you don't remember school and you don't remember things that," they'll be looking at the sort of things that perhaps give people hang-ups, and my siblings can't wind me up in the way that they can wind each other up, because I don't have any of those childhood grievances or whatever that you might, silly things, like that. And I don't remember, my mum and dad being strict in the way that they would have been when we were children and that kind of stuff. I don't know. Yeah, I guess. Well, I'm certainly glad that I forget, that I don't remember the accident itself, and I don't remember, because that would be very traumatic, if I remembered that, and I don't remember my seizures happening, and I don't remember. Yeah, there's a lot of things, and the fact that I do, um, a lot of things are hazy probably does mean that I don't dwell on things, like the loss of my mother-in-law that I mentioned, who I loved a bit, and things like that, where on a day-to-day basis you don't necessarily call upon all the time, and so yeah, there probably is that, but also there's the other side of it, which is sad that you don't have, particularly as you're getting older and your parents are getting older, you know, not being able to. There's nothing real in your mind when your siblings talk about that holiday that we had, or those magical times when your parents are, when you're younger and all that kind of stuff growing up together. And also now as a dad as well, like, there will be things that people will tell me that we did with the kids and I don't remember. And so it's a real mix because, yeah, there's certainly some truth in that. Like I suppose it is a benefit that I don't remember those very unpleasant things. But I do remember some unpleasant things. So yeah, it's a bit of a mix, I guess. It's different to, I guess, how a lot of people see memory.
And so now going to why writing? Because you could have been interested in so many things, music, construction, baking. Why writing? And how did this happen?
Yeah, well, you mentioned baking. That's one of my. That's kind of like my other passion that I got into very early with my mum. Something I could do. So I love doing that. But yeah, with the writing. So I was very fortunate that most of the damage was on my right side of my brain. Um, so which I know can impact your imagination, I guess, and your creativity. But for whatever reason, because of the way it's happened, it doesn't seem to have affected that too badly. It affects episodic memory, but on the left side, thankfully, it wasn't as much damage, and so I was very fortunate to have my language. So it wasn't perfect, but I was able to understand people, and and I struggled with reading for a long time because I think mainly because of my short-term memory. So and the more I tried to concentrate on something and keep it in my head, the harder it would be. So I would forget who I just um, had read about. So on a page-by-page basis, I would be really struggling. So I struggled with reading for a long time. And also the way that I see the words seems to be different to how it would be. So I don't see the shape of the words as such. I'm kind of seeing the letters because so I'm quite a slow reader. But yeah, I think the main problem was my memory. So it took me a long time to learn to read in the same way that certainly I was way behind people my age. Um, and then writing as well. I didn't seem to have handwriting as such for whatever reason. So I kind of had to get used to how I was going to, every time I'd be thinking, oh, I'd do a D differently every time or whatever. Interestingly enough, I could immediately touch type. So I had that, they say like, oh, try and type your name and, like, can you find this letter or whatever? And I could just type. So that was a really weird thing that I just somehow kept that. But yeah, so it was very, so I found reading and trying to keep memory of what I'd read or what I thought about or whatever very difficult. So when I got this idea, so unlike a lot of writers, I didn't decide I wanted to be a writer and then try and think of a story. It was the other way around for me. So having got those memories back suddenly, which was a massive moment in my life and really changed how I saw myself and my past and my future, going forward, having had something from the past. And after this sort of 10-year journey of trying to find them, And I suddenly had the idea. I was a fan of, I guess because I was behind with my reading, I was a fan of children's adventure stories and fantasy and stuff like that. And suddenly there was just this click in my head, and I got this idea for this story about this boy who has a brain injury, and he wakes up in this other world, and it's slightly got a fantasy twist on it. So he wakes up in this other world that isn't this world, it's slightly different, which just kind of helps you understand what it feels like to wake up here and not know stuff. So he wakes up in this other world with no memory, and has to find out who he is, and find his family and stuff. But also he's kind of expected to do this great thing, which is a real struggle, and he has to find his memory before he's found. And just this story and these characters just came to me suddenly, which was amazing. And it just I found it so therapeutic. I mean, the neurologist had always said that writing was a good way to if you can try and do that. And initially I just found it so difficult, kind of. So I had never sort of done that really as a therapy, but I found it so therapeutic, not just so in lots of ways. I mean, because it was based on that 10-year journey and all the people that had helped me and all the emotional kind of highs and lows and stuff, I just found it so therapeutic recycling all that into something new and exciting, because a lot of people are interested in my my accurate story of me in real life. But for me, whenever people said, oh, we'd love to write a book, or whatever, you should try and write a book about this or get someone to help you, it always just felt too difficult. The idea, because obviously, as I'm sure a lot of writing a book isn't that simple, and it's a lot of work. And so to actually commit yourself fully to going back and reliving all that and stuff, when I've kind of tried to move on, and just always felt too difficult. And this was so different. It was a therapy, because it was like I was recycling all that into this new exciting thing. And so even though writing was incredibly difficult at first, because trying to keep tabs on these characters, particularly as it wasn't strictly in this world, so all this stuff, and it was really, really tricky, but I really wanted to do it, and I was very determined to do this. And just it kind of became another thing that I was like, wow, I can do this. I can write, and it's not easy, but and I have a creative mind, so I kept like a million notes everywhere, and after about 18 months, I had a first draft of the book, and Sophie, who I mentioned works in publishing, said, "Oh wow, like you should really explore this, see how it goes." And so yeah, so then I learned a bit how to edit, sort of, and then so did a couple more drafts, and then amazingly now I've signed to this wonderful literary agency, who are now putting this first book. I should also mention it's part of a series, because there was so much to tell, and because I didn't really know what I was doing, I was just doing it for myself. So this book is the first part. There's a kind of significant event. So it's the first part of his story, and then there's others. So they're putting my first book to publishers this year, in a few weeks, which is very exciting. So yeah, something I never thought I could do. And now that once I wrote that book, other stories would come to me, and I just find it really, really, I find like writing has helped me with my memory as well, because it's kind of really helped exercise, my brain a bit more, in terms of trying to link things together and keep track of different characters and their backstories and stuff. So like, it's helped me as much as I've made it happen. It's helped me a lot as well. So yeah.
Why children's book? Why not adult's book? If you choose fiction over a narrative
Sure.
of your own, why not tell us story? Why just limited to kids?
Well, it's not. I mean, I say children's, but it's a novel, and but it's because of the age of the boy. So I had the idea of a boy because that's how I felt, and he starts off at the age of 12, because that's how old in my mind I was at that time. So I only had like 12 years experience, and Yeah, it's just kind of strange. I think I kind of felt it easier because, as I say, that's kind of my mind was in a different place to an adult at that time. I was very kind of, uh, I'd feel wonder in a lot of the things that I guess adults wouldn't, and saw things in a different way. But I was also, um, yeah, it kind of, I didn't write it as a children's book as such. I didn't never expected it to get published. I just wrote it for me, and I found it really therapeutic. But then later, once Sophie said this is really good and this is a great story, and maybe we could explore the idea of that. Then an editor that took an interest, and she helped me edit it, and she said, "Well, this is perfect for middle grade because of the age of the characters and the nature of the story and stuff." So then it kind of became a children's book, but it's a novel. It's 70,000 words. It's not um, but and I think there are a lot of messages in there for, as with all good children's stories. There's a lot of messages in there for adults that are taken from my adult life, and um, so yeah, it's. But I am starting to have ideas for stories now as well that are specifically for adults, not for children. So we'll see how that goes.
So I think your kids want to be part of the podcast as well, which I think is good.
They
They
definitely
have their
do.
own story. They have their own story to tell. But I want to ask two aspects there. One aspect, which is to tell us a little bit more about this role of music, because you just told us about the roles of words, and writing and fiction and creation with words. So, what do you think happened with music for you that opened up this connection with memory?
Yeah, it's a really. I mean, music is just unlike anything else. There's this really. It kind of seems to have this amazing way that it links to memory that other things don't. And I know that from meeting other people with memory problems and how it can just do things and evoke memories, or feel familiar even if you're not sure why or whatever, which I've certainly experienced as well. Um, and For a long time, because I couldn't get those memories back, even though I was exploring the music of that time and stuff, um, I kind of doubted how much of a part that could play in my story. But then having had that, finally found some music that did bring those memories back. Yeah, it's a very powerful thing, and I've always loved music anyway. But but yeah, it just has this amazing quality about it, that there's some kind of primitive thing that we seem to have with music, that the human brain just stores it differently or has a special place for it. And um, yeah, a lot like smells and things like that, seem to evoke such vivid and powerful memories for people, going way back. So yeah, obviously, I mean, I've always loved music, but now it's so special to me. And that song that was the first one to bring anything back has got a big meaning for me. So yeah, it's a wonderful thing, and we've got musicians in the family as well. So yeah, music is a big part of my life. So
And it probably will remain as well. So tell us, unavoidably, given that this is 2021 and we've all gone through a pandemic, which is a pretty unique event at the world scale. So tell us a little bit about how that has been for you and your family, considering that you are in the
yeah,
UK, and I assume you've had some lockdown as well. And
we have. Yeah, we've. It was. Yeah, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it too much. It has been tricky, as I'm sure it has been for a lot of people. I mean, I am always. I have never, even in the difficult lockdowns, particularly the winter lockdown, which went on and on and on. Um, I'm always grateful for the fact that we had an income, because for a lot of people that disappeared. So we never lost sight of how lucky we were to have money. or not much, but we had one income, and that's something that a lot of people didn't have. Um, and also to live in a society where we were able to get essentials and all that kind of stuff. So never lost sight of that. But yeah, it was tricky, particularly having such young children. So my so I have two daughters, and my eldest didn't start school until September last year, September 2020. So the first sort of right up until September, it was just us at home. There was no nursery or anything like that, and so so it was very challenging trying to find things to stimulate them every day and teaching them things, and just not having. I'm a very sociable person, even though I struggle with the recognition and my memory and stuff. But in terms of the people that are close to me, I feel a strong need to be around them and to see them. And particularly as a parent, I want my children to, we know scientifically how important it is for children's development to be around people. So I really struggled with that. I really, as a parent, less for myself, but more, as difficult as it was being at home all the time with no groups or, visiting people and doing stuff. I've just been mindful of the children and like the effect that this must have had, even if it isn't permanent. I was very glad that my 5-year-old was able to start school, even though it was, there was then another proper lockdown in winter. So she got about 3 months of her first school life, and then they had to do this home learning, which obviously at that age is not easy. But yeah, she has had, over the sort of year, like she has had some socialization, and so that really helped. But for my now 3-year-old, she just turned 3, so she was between 18 months and turning 3. This has all happened, which is, is so important to socially develop in that period. So it was really I knew why we had to do it and how important it was, from a health, protecting each other and stuff. But it was really tricky. It was very hard for my parents to not see them, because they're in their 70s and you want to see your grandchildren, and so that was really hard. We tried to make it work with the whole Zoom thing and everything, but there's only so much that can work. So yeah, it was very difficult. I found ways to. Thankfully, we could still go to 1 or 2 playgrounds in the winter. So and there was. I don't know about the society you're living in, but here there was a real divide between people. A lot of people felt that you literally shouldn't do anything. You shouldn't go outside. You shouldn't go to the park. You shouldn't, even if it was almost empty. It wasn't safe to do anything. And I think as a parent, as I say, particularly with an 18-month 2-year-old, you have to strike a balance, because you're so aware of the very negative impact of absolutely doing nothing for such a long time in those formative years. I mean, all these studies that were done before this, and that was all thrown up in the air, and people were saying, no, it doesn't matter. This is the only thing that matters. And it was, COVID was horrific and is horrific. And it was really important that we were protecting other people. And I myself, living with epilepsy, was high risk. So thankfully, here in the UK, I was able to get my vaccine relatively early. Yeah, we kind of had to. It was very limited. We did do our part, if you like to call it that. And we did stay at home. The first lockdown, we did nothing. We just stayed at home. We didn't go to the park. We didn't any of that. So, and then as the time went on and we realized, wow, this is going to be a huge part of her early life. In the winter, particularly in the winter, things aren't as busy as well. So I thought, no, she needs to go on a swing, and she needs to, if nothing else. And see other children from afar in the playground, just things like that. I think as a parent, you had to strike a balance, if it was possible and legal, even, because our government, did crack down, especially for our society, where we're used to being able to kind of make our own decisions, and never before in my lifetime have I known a time where the government has had to be so dictate the way we live our lives in such a and for a good reason. I mean, it's it is what it is, and I lost a friend to COVID last year, and it's a very real thing. So yeah, it's been difficult, as I'm sure it has. It's affected everybody in different ways, I think, and it was a real worry for me as well, having epilepsy. Even though it's not a respiratory thing, but if I get sick with anything, so if I get a gastric, any kind of infection, it can bring on seizures, and so I was worried about catching it as well. But yeah, it's been a challenge, but thankfully we are we've been able to see the family a bit more, and I think the children are very resilient, and I think so long as you kind of approach these things in the right way and find a slight balance somewhere, and you're patient and you kind of keep. I think my whole thing in life, the way it's got me through a lot of things, is having a different perspective and being able to see, okay, this isn't forever, and that will, I think it's very. I've seen a lot of people who perhaps haven't been through uh, things before this, who've really struggled, with the idea of being restricted and not being able to, and just being around something like this. Whereas for me, I was very kind of, I don't know, it was kind of like seeing what we can do and what's not dangerous and what's not going to kill us, and rather than being like, oh, there's this new disease, it's kind of like, okay, well, you're very practical. My dad's a doctor, and that's kind of given me this very kind of practical outlook on things. And so I was like, if we've done all the right things, if we're avoiding doing these things, and we're washing our hands, and we're using antibiotics, and whatever, then you get on with your life, and you can't live sat watching the TV and worrying about it, because you've done what you need to do. You've taken a risk assessment, and then that it's not forever. So you kind of, I think I just have a different perspective to some people that I know who have really struggled through this, and I feel very sorry for them, because it must be awful if you don't have that perspective, because the way that the media operates to give you this fear, this non-stop fear. I mean, I didn't watch, I wanted to know the essentials, what we needed to know, but I didn't sit there watching the TV. I think maybe being a parent helped with that, because you can't. So, um, but I think it was definitely a challenge. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was a challenge in our own way, but I think my outlook kind of helped us, and Sophie has that too, and so we kind of we saw that all the things that we could have, and as I said before, we kind of were in our mind all the time. We're all those poor people who have lost their income. We have one income, which is something a lot of people don't have. We have free healthcare here to a point. So all those sorts of things, we were, looking around the world and just thinking, wow, we're so lucky. So even though it was a challenge compared to life without COVID, we kind of, that got us through. So,
Well, Thomas, before we conclude this really wonderful conversation you and I both had, oh, I hope you had it. I certainly did. I would like to ask you what I ask all my guests, and I think yours will be very special. What is your weird sauce for this life that you've experienced so far?
um, I think a big one is and it's definitely the message in my book, is that if something is not impossible, then you can do it. And if you can do one thing, just one thing. So, for instance, living with a disability, unfortunately, you have to accept that there is something that you can't do. And people don't like it when we have to say that. I've got friends with, we've got a whole range of different. My friend Reese, who's blind, has a great outlook as well. But it's kind of, I think, when you live with a disability, unfortunately, there is no magic thinking a way out of it. And there was a point in my life when I realized that actually accepting my limitations was kind of freeing, because it kind of allows you to really focus on what you can do and see how awesome you can be at stuff, at the stuff that you can do. So for instance, writing then came to me, and I realized how great I could be at that. So, the fact that I can't drive and I can't do a lot of jobs that really I do struggle with because of my memory and my concentration and having seizures and all that kind of stuff. I could look at it that way, because there is a lot of stuff that all my peers can do that I can't. Or I can say, wow, I have my language and I can do this and whatever. So for me, it's about seeing, my kind of ethos is, if you can do just one thing, and for hopefully most of us that we can do a lot more than one, but if you can do one thing, you can be amazing at that. And if it's not impossible, then you can do it. So that's my weird source.
Thomas, thank you very much. I certainly wish that COVID will come to an end very
Me
quickly
too.
for your children and for yourself. And
Thank
obviously
you.
we'll link the in the episode notes your book link when it comes out, and we'll be
Thank you.
cheering you on when that comes out. So we wish you all the best with this.
Thank you. It was lovely talking to you.
Lovely talking to you, and be well.
Thank you. You too.
If this conversation stopped you in your track, share it with your network. You never know whose life you might change for the better. Thank you for listening. Stay curious about our next guest, and stay curious about life.